Inspiration can come from the most unexpected places, and I'll be sharing tips and ideas to help spark your creativity and bring fresh color palettes to your designs. For my project today, I'm going to be using the Craft Your Life Project Kit Arched Foliage. Now, in this kit, you do get an embossing folder. There's also a clear stamp set with lots of really great and inspirational sentiments, plus that large arched foliaged image. There is a coordinating die for the foliage and larger sentiments, and then a stencil. The first thing I want to do is stamp out my image. It is a really large image, so I trimmed my cardstock to about 6 inches by 8.5 to be able to fit the entire thing. I'm placing my cardstock inside of my Stampwheel 2.0, and then once I have my foliage positioned so that it all fits on the cardstock, I'm going to pick that up with that top plate. Then I'm going to ink up the image using limestone ink, which is a light gray ink from the Rock Collection Fresh Dye ink set. In case you're new to my videos, when I do my stenciling, I like to stamp the image initially in a light color like the limestone ink. The reason that I do that is when I do my ink blending, I don't want to risk the chance of smearing any of the black ink. You could heat set it if you want to start out with the black ink, but I find I just get more true of a color when I stamp in a light gray ink first. And then when I'm done ink blending, I'll come back and stamp over the top once again with a black ink. When looking for color inspiration for my card projects, there are a lot of great resources out there, but sometimes what I find most inspiring are my home decor pieces. This happens to be one that I have in my house in front of an arched frame, and I fell in love with the light pinks and the mix of greens and that wine color. And I decided I wanted to try this color palette in my creation. So take a look around your house because you can find color inspiration in anything, whether it be curtains, bed sheets, or even a shower curtain. For the stencils in this set, you're actually getting 3 pieces, but we only need 2 for the foliage. The last piece is kind of more of a background piece that I won't be using today, but it would be a really fun kind of textured look to your background. I have my cardstock placed down on my 9 by 12 sticky mat, and then because of the large cardstock and also the large stencil, I did hold that down with some satin masking tape. After comparing colors with my home decor piece to my ink swatches, I came out with the Rose Petal collection and the Frosted Foliage collection. Now, these stencils are more of a coloring stencil, which means we're just filling in the open area. We're not layering stencils on top of one another to create any type of texture or dimension. It is literally something we can just color our images in. So I need to get a little creative with my ink collections that I have picked out. Now, because this is only a 2 piece coloring stencil, this is actually going to give me a lot of room to work with the colors that I picked out to match that home decor piece. I started out with the lightest pink in the Rose Petal collection and a mini blending brush, and I went around the outer tips of each of the leaves. Then I'm going to come in with a light green ink. I think this one was the second to lightest in that Frosted Foliage collection. This time I'm using a micro blending brush. Some of those are getting pretty close together and next to that light pink. And when light pink and green kind of get too close to one another, they sometimes don't play well together. And I didn't want to create a muddy look. So I'm kind of just coming in close to the pink, but not all the way. Now that I have the base color down, I can start intensifying each of those areas. I'm coming in with the next shade darker in the green line, again using a micro blending brush and kind of adding a little bit of that depth and dimension with that darker shade. Then I can come in with the next darkest pink color in that rose petal collection and do the same thing, except this, I'm kind of trying to keep it to maybe just one side. I don't want that to get too intense. I really wanted to keep some of that area that light pink because referring back to my picture, there is a lot of light pink in there. I removed the first layer of the stencil, brought in the second stencil, again holding that down with the satin masking tape, and I'm going to pretty much do the exact same thing, except I do take it a step further with the darker colors, and you're going to see where the foliage comes to life with the way that the colors react with one another. So again, I'm starting out by giving my foliage that base layer, so that really light pink on the very outer edges, just like I did in the first layer. Then again, coming in with that light green, doing that from the stems and working my way out, but not too far where it's going to overlap the pink and create a muddy look. Then I'm going to come in with that shade darker of the green, again using a micro blending brush and really getting into those stems and that part of the leaf that's closest to the stem. By bringing in the micro blending brushes, I am really able to control where I'm applying that green ink and also how much. I like having my ink pad directly on my sticky mat because it's holding my ink pad in place, but I also have the lid there also on the sticky mat. So that way I can tap off any excess ink onto my lid or pick it up if I need to. Now I decided to get a little adventurous and I brought in the darkest color in this frosted foliage collection, which is forest fern. Now, this is where the magic really starts to happen. And I have a couple theories as to why this started to work so well. So I'm starting out now. This is one of the smallest micro blending brushes. So it's pretty tiny. And I'm using it as kind of a shader. I'm not really blending in circular motions like I normally would. I'm actually kind of using it to trace around the outer edge of the leaves. Now, I thought I would stick on that adventurous level and bring in a shade darker of the pink. And I'm going to start applying that around the outer edges of the pink portion of the leaves. Again, I'm using one of the smallest brushes out of the detail blending brushes. And again, using it as kind of tracing along the outer edges. Now, it was about here that I discovered when this color overlapped with that fern, it didn't create mud. It gave me kind of a wine type of color. I don't even know how to describe the color, but it was a beautiful blend. It really just created magic on my card. Now, I didn't overdo it, but I did kind of have it blend into that green a little bit. And my theory on this is that even though this is green, it has a lot of blue in it. And I think that is what helped make this possible. Now, I do not have any special training in color or color theories. It's just things that I literally stumble upon while I'm experimenting. So, even though you might feel like you took a lot of steps to get to a point you were and you're scared you're going to mess it up, you still need to try those things because when I was doing this, my thought was, what if? What if I brought in that really dark shade of pink? What if I used that really dark green? And if I wouldn't have tried it and experimented with it, I would have completely missed this color combination. Now, because I loved it so much, I brought back in that first part of the stencil and I did the same thing and it just made such a gorgeous blend. Some of the areas you might need to step it back up to a mini blending brush if the leaf is pretty big, but for the most part, the micros really helped when it came to the shading. So now that I have that all completely filled in, I'm going to pop this back over into my Stampwheel 2.0, placing it in the same position that I originally had it, and then I'm going to ink up the image using the Obsidian ink. Another reason that I love doing it this way is sometimes our images look fantastic without adding the black outline back in. It can almost give it a no line coloring effect, but adding that black outline in there is really going to make all of these colors just pop off of the page. So I am just making sure to apply firm pressure, especially over some of those areas where the leaves seem to be a little more clustered together than others. And I am so happy with the results of this. Now, because I used the Obsidian ink, that ink does stay wet a little longer. So I'm going to hit that with my heat tool to dry that before I die cut it. Otherwise, sometimes that ink can transfer to our die cutting plates. So I'm going to line up that coordinating die, hold it down with the satin masking tape, and then run that through my die cut machine and work on my background. I wanted to have a background that was fairly similar to the color palette that I used for that arched foliage. And this too was something that was an experiment because I really loved how those darker colors overlapped. So I'm starting out with one of the light pinks from that rose petal collection using a large blending brush. And I'm kind of starting in the corners and going in a diagonal blend across the card front. I knew that in my arched foliage, I laid a base layer down. So that is what I'm doing on my background is I laid that base layer down of the light pink. Then I went to the next shade darker in that line. Again, kind of starting in those opposite corners and adding that darker pink. I knew I had to build this up in order for it to work. Then also coming in with that darker tone, this time I am using a small blending brush just to get the outer edges because the darker color is really kind of the magic color in this whole color scheme. So I did clean up my glass surface there and I'm coming in with the greens. Now, this is a light shade of green. I'm starting in that top corner that doesn't have any ink on it yet and just slightly overlapping the pink. Then I can step up to the next darkest green, again, just kind of hitting the corner and lightly brushing up against that dark pink. They're kind of saying hello to each other. But now I can bring in that darker color, which is the forest fern, and we can really start getting these two colors to meet and have fun overlapping each other and coming out with this gorgeous color combination. Now, I was still being just a little hesitant on how much ink I was applying on that top edge, but I brought it down to my bottom corner and I purposely overlapped that dark pink. It might seem a little black or a little almost a dark blue, but I think it came out really great for the background. I like having not only a die cut out sentiment, but I also like having a second sentiment that's stamped right onto the card front. So again, I'm bringing my background into my Stamp Wheel 2.0. I lined up the arched foliage and a die cut out sentiment that I did off screen. So that way I could find a perfect placement for this smaller sentiment. So I'm stamping that in the Obsidian ink. And then I'm going to take a post it note and I'm going to trim off the sticky part of the post it note just to mask off that sentiment. I knew I wanted to add splatters to this background. I didn't want to do it before because then otherwise it gets hard to stamp over the top of splatters. But I didn't want my splatters to obscure my sentiment. So by masking it off, I'm able to kind of have my cake and eat it too. Now I'm adding splatters with the metallic watercolor set, just using a paintbrush, some water, and then one of the golds out of that collection. I can then remove that mask and I have my arched foliage off screen. I already went ahead and I had die cut out a second one just from some plain white cardstock and layered that together to help build up dimension. And then I added liquid glue to the back of that and I'm placing this on the front of my card panel and I'm going to set it off on the side and place something heavy on it and let that sit. So while that is adhering down to the cardstock and drying, I am going to take my scoring board and my bone folder, and I'm going to create a side folding card base. This is going to be an A2 size card base, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But this arched foliage would look amazing on a 5 by 7 card. So I'll reinforce my fold with my bone folder, and then I'm going to take my background and a large pair of scissors, and I'm going to trim off all of that excess. Now, you could save this for future card projects if you wanted to have some leaves peeking in on the edge, but there wasn't a lot left. I used most of that image. So now that I have my edges cleaned up, I added a tape runner to the front of my card base, and then I can add my panel over the top. I have my sentiment that I did stamp and die cut off screen just to save a little bit of time. And I'm going to put a little bit of the foam tape behind that and add that so it's slightly overlapping the foliage, but it is centered over my stamped sentiment. And that is it, my friends. By pulling color inspiration from something as simple as a plant in my house, I was able to create this beautiful layered design with the arched foliage Craft Your Life project kit. I love how the color combination of pinks, greens, and the gold metallic splatters came together to create a soft yet striking card. I hope this technique gives you some fun ideas for finding your own color inspiration in unexpected places. Thanks so much for joining me today and happy crafting.